Careful about this. If one is a vegetarian, one needs to investigate precisely what rennet has been used. But in our case, no rennet whatsoever is used, so there's no question about it. The milk and therefore the cheese is highly suitable for vegetarians. And I suppose a vegetarian is naturally concerned about the way the livestock is cared for. And here, I think there's no question about it that our standards of husbandry are extremely high. The animals are looked after considerably better than the humans.
Well, there's an enormous variety of goat's cheeses available now, and it's quite a good idea to sort of keep trying them and find out which ones you like the best. This kind of cheese here is a sort of cross between Camembert and Brie, and that's quite nice for eating with really good bread. This one's a hard goat's cheese. That's good if you want to grate cheese for something. This is a French one here, and this is made in a log shape, and it comes in slices like this. That's very good for melting, for cooking with. This is also a French cheese. This is called crottin, and that's really nice grilled or used in cooking, or even good to just eat with nice bread. It's got a nice pungent flavour, that one. But this one here, the one you've just seen made, is the one I'm going to be using in the recipe I want to show you. And that recipe is a recipe called twice-baked goat's cheese soufflés. Now, we start the soufflés by making a white sauce, and I've got here 8 fluid ounces of milk. And this has just been brought up to the boil over a gentle heat with some flavours infusing in it. And what it's had in it is a small piece of onion, a bay leaf, some salt and a little bit of nutmeg. And I just want to strain those flavourings out now. And then what I'm going to do is just wipe the saucepan out, put it back on the heat and begin by making a classic version of a white sauce, which is the base of the soufflé. And I've got in my saucepan 1 ounce of butter, and that's going to melt now. And then when it's melted, I'm going to add 1 ounce of flour and stir that in. Now, if you're one of those people who thinks a soufflé is difficult to make, these little soufflés are not difficult to make, and their charm is that you can make them 3 days in advance and just pop them into the oven when you're ready to serve them. Sounds incredible, doesn't it? But I'm going to be able to actually show you that it's true. Now the butter's melted, in goes my 1 ounce of flour. That's going to be just blended into the butter, and till all the butter has absorbed all the flour. And then when it has, I'm just going to add the milk, just a little drop at a time. Now this is the classic way to make a white sauce, just a little drop of milk at a time, keeping the wooden spoon going round until gradually, in a few minutes, gradually, that will have absorbed all the milk. Now when you've incorporated all that milk in, you'll have a lovely smooth glossy paste, and what you do is turn the heat down really low and let that cook for about 2 minutes just to get the flavour of the flour cooked out. And then when you've done that, you transfer the whole mixture to a mixing bowl, which I'm just about to do. Turn the heat out first, and then it's going to have lots of other ingredients added to it. Now first of all, 2 egg yolks. They're going to go in first and just be stirred in and incorporated, which will only take a second or two. And then, after the egg yolks, I'm going to add a dessert spoon of fresh snipped chives, which give a nice flavour. And then also the cheese. Now I've got 4 ounces of the peppercorn goat's cheese here, but I'm only going to add about 3/4 of it, because the rest is going to go on top of the soufflés. So we'll leave that there. Just stir that in. And now all this needs is some seasoning of salt, because we've already got pepper in there. So we'll just give it a nice good seasoning of salt. And then it's going to have egg whites folded in to that mixture. So we'll now just beat up the egg whites, 2 egg whites that were left over from the yolks. Right, the egg whites have to be up to the soft peak stage, and then I'm going to switch now to a metal spoon and just fold the egg white in. And the way to do this is to take 1 spoonful of egg white first and just fold that in, and what that does is it sort of slackens off and loosens the mixture, and that'll make it easier to fold in the rest of the egg whites. Now I've told you that you can, we'll put all the rest of the egg whites in now, I've told you that you can actually make these little soufflés 3 days in advance. What I haven't told you is you can also make them and freeze them. I don't think they're quite as good when they're frozen, but they do freeze, so if you've got a heavy schedule and you want to prepare in advance, that's quite a good way to do it. Now you just have to use cutting and folding movements until all the egg white has been gently folded in. Don't stir it, because what you want to do is keep the air. So the folding movements actually keep the air, which is what makes the soufflé light. Now, this mixture makes 4 soufflés, and what you do is you spoon it into well-buttered little ramekin dishes. Now these are 5-ounce capacity, or they measure 3 inches in diameter. So when you're buying them, that's the size you want. Now you fill them up to the brim like that, and then you pour in boiling water from the kettle into the roasting tin here, about 1 inch of boiling water. This creates a nice steamy atmosphere, and they go into the oven, preheated to gas mark 4 or the equivalent, and they get cooked for just 12 minutes. Then you take them out of the oven, and when they've been in the oven for 12 minutes, you'll find they're quite puffy. When you take them out, they subside a little bit, but you're not to worry about that. That's okay. This is what they'll look like when they've cooled, and then you can pack them away in the refrigerator and just bring them out when you're ready to serve them. Now, when you are ready to serve them, you need a greased baking sheet, and then you just take a knife and go round the edge. You need to have them straight out of the fridge. If you leave them out too long, they get a bit soft and they're difficult to turn out. So then you turn it out onto the palm of your hand like that. Now, if you find you've still got a little bit left in the base, you just stick that on like that. Turn the soufflé up, the right way up, and then you just sprinkle it with a little bit of cheese we had left over. And they go this time into a hot oven, gas mark 6, and they're going to take about 25 minutes to cook. So now we're going to have a look at some. Serve the soufflés presto pronto, and I think it's actually very nice to serve them on a bed of rocket leaves dressed with a sun-dried tomato vinaigrette, which is what I've got here, and then just finally, before they go to the table, just give them a little sprinkling of Parmesan cheese. Here are some ideas for a summer lunch out of doors. This is a savoury cheesecake made with Greek feta cheese. And this little bowl next door with a basil leaf on top contains a dark, pungent mixture called tapenade, made with olives and capers. And how about to serve with the cheesecake some homemade pickled peaches? Well, if you're not eating any meat or fish, the chances are you're probably going to eat lots more vegetables. And I want to show you a really lovely way to cook vegetables, and that's to oven roast them. Now, I've got a mixture of vegetables here. First is a pound of small tomatoes, second a large onion roughly chopped, then a red pepper roughly chopped, and a yellow pepper. And I've got 2 more vegetables. They're over here. This is 2 medium courgettes and an aubergine, and they have been sprinkled with salt, put in a colander and weighted on the top, so that all the juices, the excess juices, can drain off, because sometimes those juices are bitter, and also we don't want too much juice, and you can just see how much has come off. I've left those an hour to drain. Then you take them and dry them in a cloth, because they're very wet after soaking, and I've got some here that have already been dried in the cloth, and you just put those in with the rest of the vegetables. And then we're going to add some flavourings to them. First of all, 2 cloves of garlic, fat cloves of garlic, roughly chopped, the garlic. And this is roughly 2 tablespoons of torn basil leaves. They're going to go in. And then I'm going to add 3 tablespoons of olive oil. 1, 2, 3. And what I'm going to do now is just sort of toss all the vegetables and garlic and basil in the olive oil. And then they're going to all be spread out on a roasting tray ready for roasting. It's a very colourful mixture, this. Looks very, very summery indeed. So on we go to the roasting tray. And what I use to roast, you need a shallow tin, not a deep one because it creates too much steam. So what I use is the actual oven shelf that goes in the oven. If you haven't got a shelf like this, you can use a Swiss roll tin, which might buckle, but it doesn't matter, it comes back to shape afterwards, or you can use 2 smaller tins. Now I'm going to put some freshly milled pepper and some salt on, and they go into a very, very high oven, 500 degrees or the equivalent. We're not used to using our ovens that high normally, but that's as high as you need it. And then what will happen is they will roast in the oven and get that lovely sort of tinged black edges, which gives flavour, and also the roasting sort of concentrates the flavour of the vegetables beautifully. So we'll just have a look at some now that have been roasted. There we are, oven roasted vegetables, and now what I want to do is show you a recipe using them. And what we're going to make with the roasted vegetables is a roasted vegetable lasagna. Lasagna has got a bit sort of so easily available nowadays that you can get it in chill food counters, you can get it in pubs, but when it's homemade it really is quite special, so we're going to make one. And first of all you need to have a white sauce. Now I've shown you the classic white sauce early on, now I want to show you the cheats one. It's very easy and very instant, but you must start off with cold milk. So I've got a pint of cold milk in here. And to that, I'm going to add 1 1/4 ounces of flour. That just goes in with the milk. 1 1/2 ounces of butter. And there's a bay leaf there for flavour. In goes the butter. And then I'm going to put some salt and pepper in there as well. And then, since the recipe for lasagna came from Italy, very Italian ingredient, and that's freshly grated nutmeg, a spice that's used quite a lot in Italy, quite a lot in England, but I don't think the French use it much, but it's wonderful spice and lovely for creamy white sauce. Always use it fresh though. If you buy it ready grated, it loses all its character very quickly. Now we're going to put the heat on, and we want the heat to be fairly high for this, and then go in with your whisk and just whisk everything together. And it looks totally impossible at this stage when you see all this awful mixture in front of you. You might be likely to panic, but don't, and I'll tell you why you don't need to panic, because provided you've got fat with flour, you won't get lumps. You'll get lumps if you put flour and liquid together, but if you've got fat there and you just keep whisking, you won't get any lumps. So just go on whisking until the whole thing comes up to the boil and thickens to a lovely creamy white sauce. And then as soon as you have a thick creamy sauce, you turn the heat right down, really low, and let it just bubble and simmer very gently for 2 minutes to cook the flour out, as we did before. Then you turn the heat out, and we have some Parmesan cheese here that's going to go in. I'm going to use 3 tablespoons of Parmesan cheese into the sauce to just give it flavour. And don't forget, if you're using Parmesan cheese, you need to have fresh Parmesan cheese and grate it yourself. The ready grated stuff really isn't very good at all. So now that's ready, we can assemble the lasagna. You do this by putting 1/3 of the sauce into a lasagna dish. This is approximately 9 inches square. You can use one 10 inches or 8.5. I mean, it's not vital, but it's approximately 9 inches square. And what I'm going to do is actually put 1/3 of the sauce into the bottom of the dish, approximately a third, nothing's vital in this. And spread it out. That's about it. And then that's going to have some roasted vegetables, but before I add them, I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of capers to give extra zest and flavour to the vegetables, and 2 ounces of olives that have been pitted and chopped. There goes the olives. And I'm going to just mix the olives and capers into the vegetables, and we're working in thirds. So I've put a third of the sauce in, and now I'm just going to put a third of the vegetables on top to join the sauce. You'll see how much the vegetables have actually shrunk, and that's because all the juices have evaporated off, and that's what gives them this lovely, wonderful, concentrated flavour. And now the next ingredient is grated mozzarella cheese. I've got 3 ounces, and again, I'm working in thirds, so a third of that. And this is the ready grated mozzarella that you can buy in the supermarket. So a third of the mozzarella, and now the lasagna. This is the lasagna that you can actually put straight into the lasagna without pre-cooking it, which is very convenient. And it's about 6 ounces or 9 sheets. Again, it isn't vital. If you want to, you can break them up and do a bit of patchwork, and it's 3 layers altogether. Then when you get to the top layer, you sprinkle it with 1 more tablespoon of Parmesan, and then the whole lot goes into the oven, preheated to gas mark 4, and it'll take about 25 to 30 minutes to become nice and bubbly and crisp on the top. And I want to show you another recipe using roasted vegetables. This time it's a couscous salad. And if you haven't used couscous before, here it is in its raw state. Here it's just like a very, very tiny, tiny grain. And it's actually pasta. It's not a grain, it's actually pasta. And to use it, I've got 10 ounces here in a bowl. And what you do is put 18 fluid ounces of vegetable stock, stir it around and just leave it for 5 minutes, and then in 5 minutes it soaks up all the vegetable stock, and then it's ready for the salad. Just go through it with a knife to separate it out a little bit. Now I'm going to put on top of the bed of couscous some roasted vegetables, and these are the same as the other ones we made, with one exception, and that is this time I've exchanged one of the peppers, the yellow pepper, for a bulb of fennel. And it's nice when you're roasting vegetables, you can sort of pick and choose and change, whatever the seasons are, the varieties. So there are the roasted vegetables. The next ingredient is cheese. And I've got here some goat's cheese with garlic and herbs, and it's been cut up in little cubes, and that's going to go over the vegetables. And I hope you've noticed I've got a lovely little goat plate here for my goat's cheese, which is rather cute. And let me say that you don't have to use goat's cheese, you can use any cheese, and in fact a nice cheese would be feta with this. And now we're going to make a dressing to go with that. And in the jug here I've got 2 heaped tablespoons of tomato puree, and to that I'm going to add 4 tablespoons of lime juice, and it must be a good 4 tablespoons, so you might need 2 or 3 limes to get that amount. Then olive oil, a nice fruity extra virgin olive oil, and I've got 4 fluid ounces of that. And then the dressing is going to have some flavourings in it. Here I've got 2 tablespoons of cumin seeds that have been roasted and ground to a fine powder. That's first. And then a little bit of kick here. I've got a rounded teaspoon of cayenne pepper. This is a harissa style dressing, although it's not really fiery hot like the true harissa dressing. It's got a nice bit of kick in it. Mix all those together until you get a well amalgamated dressing, and then just before you serve the salad you top it with a mixture of leaves, and this is actually a packet from the supermarket of mixed salad leaves, and they're just going to be spread out over the top of the salad. And then before it goes to the table, what I'm going to do is just put a little bit of dressing on the top, and then pour the rest of the dressing into a bowl and take it to the table with a spoon so that people can help themselves. And then just one more ingredient as a garnish, and that's an unusual ingredient. These are black onion seeds, and you get them in sort of oriental shops. You don't have to use them if you can't get them, but they do just give a nice bit of character and different colour. Now that is couscous salad with roasted vegetables. It will serve 8 people as a first course or 4 to 6 people as a main course. Now, a nice summer lunch to have in the garden is a pâté, but if you don't eat meat, pâté's not much good to you. So I'd like to now show you a really good vegetarian alternative. First simmer 6 ounces of pre-soaked chickpeas for about 45 minutes, and meanwhile soften 1 chopped Spanish onion and 2 cloves of garlic in 2 tablespoons of ground nut oil. This will take about 10 minutes. Put the drained chickpeas into a blender and add 2 tablespoons of lime juice, and then the softened onion and garlic, and switch on and blend till smooth. Transfer the puree to a bowl and add 1 large skinned chopped tomato, 1 fresh de-seeded chilli, 3 spring onions chopped, a tablespoon of chopped coriander, and half a teaspoon of Tabasco. Finally, add 2 tablespoons of soured cream and stir well, then just taste to check the seasoning. Serve with a garnish of black olives and flat-leaf parsley, and there we are, frijo le mole or spiced chickpea pâté. I'm making a frying pan pizza here, and in the frying pan I've got the dough which has been cooked on one side, and I'm just going to flip it over, but before I do that I'm just going to add about a tablespoon of olive oil. It had a tablespoon for the underside, and now we're just going to flip it over and cook that side. And I'll just say a little bit about that dough. It's actually a scone dough, not a bread dough, so it's much, much easier to make. You don't have to wait for it to rise and all of that. And it can all be cooked in a frying pan. It's made with 8 ounces of self-raising flour, a little olive oil and water, and to flavour it, it's got a tablespoon of mixed herbs and some salt and pepper. And now we're going to put a topping on it. And the first topping, we've got quite a few nice things to go on it, is this one here, which is a reduced tomato sauce. Now for this I started off with 1 pound of tomatoes, chopped and skins removed, and I cooked them with a small onion, some basil and garlic in a frying pan without a lid so that it reduced down to this lovely concentrated consistency. And on top of that I'm going to add some basil leaves, which have a wonderful affinity with tomato, and just scatter a few basil leaves over. And then on top of the basil leaves, more tomato, but this time this is sun-dried tomatoes preserved in olive oil. I'm just going to scatter those over next. And all the time the underneath side is cooking. It takes about 3 minutes each side. Now I'm going to add some mushrooms, 2 ounces of sliced mushrooms. So we're getting quite a pile here, but wonderful, lovely flavours. And next, some mozzarella cheese, but not the regular mozzarella cheese. This is actually smoked mozzarella, which does have a really nice flavour. That goes in next. And finally, just to give some extra bite to it, I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of capers and some olives, a dozen olives here, just chopped up and stoned. You can pat it down at this point because it won't be hot on the top. And then finally, a few more basil leaves just sprinkled over. And the dried tomatoes are preserved in olive oil. And I'm going to use a couple of tablespoons of the tomato olive oil to just drizzle over the top, and then the whole thing is transferred to the grill until it's all lovely and melted and amalgamated. Right, that's frying pan pizza with smoked mozzarella and sun-dried tomatoes, and that's all from our vegetarian summer, but I hope you'll come back and join me next time for the last programme in the series. Hello and welcome to a programme today which is all about the produce from the summer kitchen garden, because it's about this time of year when commercial and amateur growers alike are all busy reaping the harvests of all their hard labours in the earlier summer months. Well, one of my own favourite fruits of summer is this one here, the English tomato. And these tomatoes have just been picked from my neighbour's greenhouse, and as you can see they're red and ripe, ready to eat, and the stalks are standing up proudly, which is always the sign of a fresh tomato. And if you've got some nice tomatoes and they're lovely and fresh like that, one of the best ways to serve them is in a salad. And this salad here is Italian in origin. It's got sliced tomatoes, slices of mozzarella cheese, basil leaves, and then crushed rock salt, freshly milled pepper, and a nice drizzle of virgin olive oil. And the colours are supposed to represent the Italian flag, so it all looks very pretty. Now, if your tomatoes are not quite so good, then a good way to serve them in a salad is to do a roasted tomato salad. And I'm going to show you how to do this now. You start off for 4 people as a first course with 12 large tomatoes, and you slice each one into 2 and put them onto an oiled baking sheet. But before you slice them, they need to be skinned. And if you don't know how to skin a tomato, the best way to do that is to put them in a bowl, pour boiling water over them, count 30 seconds, drain them, and then you'll find the skins will slip off easily. Now, when you've arranged the tomato halves on a baking sheet, you put a little bit of garlic into each tomato half. And what I've got here is 2 very fat cloves of New Season's garlic. They're always rather fat at this time of the year. And I've just chopped them, and I'm going to just put a little bit into each tomato half. And one of the problems with English tomatoes is that the commercial growers harvest the tomatoes when they're still green, because they have to go into vans and be delivered. And in transit, when they ripen off the stalk, they lose all their nice sort of fruitiness and flavour. But we are getting some nice tomatoes now. The supermarkets are beginning to get the message, and you'll see packets that say grown for flavour. It always amuses me. I like to buy them grown for flavour, but I always think it's very funny because I wonder what they were grown for before. But of course, what they were grown for is just to get lots and lots of tomatoes. Good croppers is what they were grown for, not for flavour. But as I say, things are improving. Now you can see I'm just putting a basil leaf on top of each tomato. And although they're going to go into the oven, I find that, in fact, roasted basil leaves also have a very good flavour. They turn crisp in the oven, and it's quite unusual and quite different. And then we'll put some fresh basil leaves on afterwards. Now we need some seasoning, some salt and freshly milled black pepper over the tomatoes, and then they're just going to have just a little drizzle of oil onto each tomato half. So just let the oil just drizzle over them. There's already some on the baking sheet, so they won't stick. Probably you'll find you need about 2 tablespoons of olive oil altogether. And they're going to go into a preheated oven, gas mark 6 or the equivalent, and they'll take about 50 minutes to an hour to become nice and toasted round the edges and the flavour all concentrated. And here it is with a balsamic vinegar dressing, garnished with some fresh basil leaves and black olives. This one here is the famous Middle Eastern salad called tabbouleh. It's made with cracked wheat, chopped salad vegetables, and lots of freshly chopped mint. And this one here is a mixture of baby summer vegetables, and these are served with a warm lemon-flavoured vinaigrette and garnished with chopped chives. Well, if you were with me earlier in the series, you'll remember my little basil plants that I started out with. Well, they've now come to full maturity, and when they're ready like this to use, I always think it's time to make pesto sauce. I think each summer we should have 1 plate of spaghetti with pesto and 1 pesto rice salad. Well, now I want to show you how to make the salad, and you need for this salad if possible, some Italian arborio rice. This is the fat, round grains of rice, and this is the best quality Italian rice. And to that rice, I'm going to add, I've got some pesto ready-made here, and I'm just going to add 1/4 of the quantity of pesto to the rice and just stir it round so that all the rice grains get coated with the pesto and the oil in the sauce coats them nicely. And then what I'm going to do is put them into a frying pan, turn the heat up, and then add to the rice double its quantity. There was 8 ounces of rice there, and I'm now going to add 16 ounces of vegetable stock. So I'll pour the vegetable stock in. Just give it a good stir and add some salt. And then when it comes up to simmering point, you just, a bit of salt in first. When it comes up to simmering point, you then lower the heat, put the lid on, and leave it for about 20 minutes until all the rice has absorbed the liquid. And while that's happening, I want to show you how to make pesto sauce. Now over here, I've got my basil leaves weighed out. There's actually 2 ounces of basil leaves there, and if you're not growing basil, don't worry, you can buy it in packets from the supermarket. You just pop the basil leaves into the goblet of a food processor, and then you add to that 6 tablespoons of nice fruity extra virgin olive oil, and then a fat clove of garlic, that goes in next, and then pine nuts. I've got 1 tablespoon of pine nuts here, they're going in. And behind the pine nuts, I've got a cheese called Pecorino Romano, which is becoming more available now. This is a sort of more robust, sharper version of Parmesan, and it's very good in pesto. But if you can't get it, don't worry, you can actually use Parmesan cheese. Now we're going to season that with some salt and then whiz it all up to a puree in the blender. And the lovely thing about making pesto is the way your kitchen is filled with the most incredible aroma of basil leaves. Right, now we'll switch on. This amount of pesto is enough actually to make a pasta dish for 2 people. Some people would say 3, but we're a bit greedy here, so we find this is enough for 2. And it'll be enough to make a rice pesto salad for 4 people. There we are, and this is our freshly made pesto sauce, beautiful colour and beautiful texture. After 20 minutes, the rice has cooked and absorbed all the water. What you do is take the lid off, turn the heat out, and then just put a cloth over the top of the rice for a few minutes, just to absorb all the steam that will come out of it. And then the rice is ready to go into the salad. And what I'm going to do is actually dress the salad whilst the rice is still warm. What happens if you do this is that the grains of rice absorb the dressing of the salad much, much more easily if they're still warm while it goes on. Now the pesto's already in the bowl, and I've got a little extra dressing here, which is the juice of a lemon and 2 tablespoons of olive oil. So that's going to go in as well. And then I'm just going to use a spoon and a fork now to just toss the rice grains into the pesto and the dressing. And remember that this is Italian arborio rice. It isn't a separate rice. It doesn't cook separately. It's a little bit more creamy in consistency than long grain rice. Although I have actually made this salad with long grain rice and it works quite well. Now at this stage you can actually serve the salad hot. It's excellent with fish. It's lovely with grilled fish, and it's very good also with chicken. Or you can leave it to cool and serve it as a salad along with other salads. Now I'm just going to put it into a serving bowl, and then I'm just going to garnish it. Spread it out a little bit in the serving bowl. It's quite nice to have a shallow dish which shows off the colour very well. Spread it out like that, and then for a garnish I'm going to put 4 spring onions finely chopped. I'll just sprinkle those over the surface, like that. And then some flaked Parmesan cheese, just in very fine flakes like this, done with a potato peeler on the top, like that, just to give a little bit of extra cheese flavour. And then back to the basil bush and just get a few nice little basil leaves, just to make it look pretty as it goes to the table. There we are, pesto rice salad. Well, while the crop of new potatoes is still in season, it's nice to make the most of them, so here's an idea. First of all, slice 2 pounds of potatoes quite thinly and arrange a layer in a gratin dish. Then add some seasoning of salt and pepper, sprinkle with a little chopped onion and some chopped garlic. After that, add a layer of peeled chopped tomatoes and season again. Next, add 1 or 2 basil leaves and continue this layering, finishing off with a little drizzle of olive oil. Bake at gas mark 5 for an hour or until the potatoes are tender, and serve straight from the oven. And this is sliced potatoes baked with tomatoes and basil. Well, I think one of the neglected summer vegetables is this one here, which is bulb fennel. It's called finocchio in Italian, which I always think is quite a cute name. And I'm going to show you a recipe using fennel for roasted fennel niçoise. That's the title. First of all, I'm going to show you how to prepare it in case you're not familiar with it. You need to cut a little bit of the root end off first, just to trim it. But leave a little bit of the root end intact, and I'll show you why in a second. And then at the top you'll find it sort of goes in a little bit of a point, and the stalky bits you cut off, exaggerating the point with your knife like that, so you end up with a point. Now these little frondy bits here you need to pull off and save for a garnish later on. And then you cut the fennel bulb for this recipe into 8 pieces. So you go down the middle first, cut it in half, and then in half again, and then in half again, so that you've actually got 8 pieces altogether. Now you'll see that in the centre there is a little bit of root. So just take a little bit of the root out. And why you needed a bit of the base was to sort of keep it all together. It's a beautifully arranged vegetable, this. It sort of fans out and looks very pretty. Now I'm just going to take the rest of the root bits out of the centre and tell you, if you haven't used fennel before, what it's like. It has the texture of celery, but it's got a lovely sort of aniseed flavour, which really is delicious. And it's served an awful lot in Italy as a vegetable, but not quite so much over here. So now we've got the root bits out. Now we're going to roast it, but before that, it needs to be just blanched a little. And to blanch it, you put it in boiling water with a little salt and just give it 5 minutes. And then you drain it in a colander, which I've done here. And then it's ready to be roasted. Now over here I've got an oiled roasting pan. And I'm just going to put the pieces of fennel onto the pan and then just arrange them like that. Put a little bit of salt and freshly milled pepper over them, and then just a little drizzle of oil just on each one, olive oil. And they're going to be roasted in an oven that's preheated to gas mark 5 or the equivalent, and it'll take about half an hour for the fennel to roast and become nice and brown and tinged at the edges. And we've got some in the oven that's just about up to that stage now, so I'll let you have a look. There we go. You'll see it's all nice and tinged brown at the edges here, and what it should be like is sort of cooked through but still have a little bit of crunch and bite. Now to make our fennel niçoise, we're going to do a niçoise dressing. And in my, with my pestle and mortar here, I've crushed 1 fat clove of garlic and 1 heaped teaspoon of rock salt to a smooth paste. And to that I'm going to add the juice of a really juicy lemon. And to that, to the lemon, and garlic, I'm going to add 5 tablespoons of a nice fruity extra virgin olive oil. And then I've got all my niçoise ingredients lined up here ready. 4 anchovy fillets, and these have been chopped quite small. 12 olives, pitted and chopped. And 1 shallot, 1 little pink shallot, and that's been very finely chopped, which gives a nice bit of crunch. Mix that in, and then finally 2 large tomatoes, and the tomatoes have been skinned, de-seeded, and again chopped quite small, as you can see there. I'll just give that a good mix together, and then we're going to transfer the fennel onto a serving plate and put the dressing on while it's still warm. So we'll just do that now. And this recipe is one of those recipes that you can actually serve warm as a vegetable or cold as a salad. Either way, you're going to put the dressing on. It's good to put the dressing on while it's warm because it soaks in more easily if you do that. You can see how pretty the pieces look here, the way they sort of fan out, and the roasting gives them just that little bit of colour. Now, if you serve it warm, it's absolutely brilliant with fish. I think it's one of the nicest accompaniments to grilled fish. Or cold, you can serve it as a starter. Either way, it'll serve 4 people. Now I'm just going to pour the dressing over, and it's very juicy, the dressing, so however you're going to serve it, you need some nice crusty bread to go with it. And then as a garnish, remember the little fronds from the fennel bulb? Well, just scatter those over as a garnish before it goes to the table. And there we are. That's roasted fennel niçoise. When I hear the sound of the combine harvester, I know it's a cue that summer is drawing to a close and it's time to preserve a little bit of its sparkle for the winter months. Now, the British have always been very, very good at preserving pickles, jams and chutneys, and I've prepared several recipes for you, but I want to show you one first of all that's a little bit different, and that's spiced pickled runner beans. First, blanch 2 pounds of sliced runner beans in salted water for 5 minutes. In another pan, soften 1½ pounds of chopped onions with ½ a pint of malt vinegar. This will take about 20 minutes. When both are ready, drain the beans and add them to the onions. Now place 1½ ounces of corn flour into a small bowl and add 1 heaped tablespoon of mustard powder and a level tablespoon of turmeric. Now, with a little vinegar, mix this to a paste. Next, add this mixture to the other ingredients and simmer everything together for 10 minutes with another pint of malt vinegar. Have ready 1 pound of demerara sugar and ½ a pound of soft brown sugar and stir these in until the sugar is completely dissolved. Then simmer for a further 15 minutes. Pop the chutney in sterilised jars, seal and label them when cold and store for about a month before eating. Well, now I want to show you a recipe for homemade apricot preserve. And it's actually my mother's recipe, so I've got to make sure I get it absolutely right. You start off with 2 pounds of apricots. And I think it's better for those of you who perhaps haven't made a preserve before to start off with small amounts. You can increase them as you get more experience, but it's good to start with small amounts in the beginning. So just 2 pounds of apricots. You'll find towards the end of the summer, in August, you'll find that the price will come down and it'll be much less expensive to make. 2 pounds of apricots, which you start off the night before you want to make the preserve. You halve them, reserve the stones, keep the stones, and put the apricot halves into a preserving pan, and then you sprinkle them with 2 pounds of sugar, granulated sugar, so it's equal quantities. You can use preserving sugar, but it's more expensive and I don't think it makes very much difference. And because apricots are a little bit short in the ingredient that gives you a good set, which is pectin, you need a bit of extra pectin, so you add the juice of a lemon, a nice juicy lemon. And then you leave all that to soak overnight. Now the reason you soak the fruit overnight is when you want to make a jam where you want nice chunks of fruit, you want to firm the fruit because it's got to go under very rigorous boiling to set. And if you don't firm it up, it can sort of smash about. And when you have your preserve on your croissants or your toast, it's nice to have nice pieces of fruit in it. This applies, by the way, especially to strawberries. So soak it overnight. Then when you're ready to make the preserve, you put the pan onto a medium heat. I'll just turn the heat on. And the next thing you have to do is dissolve the